As any wise child knows, if mom says no, go ask dad, or vice versa. There's a judicial version of this where plaintiffs seek the most favorable judge for their case. It's called judge shopping. And now the federal agency that sets the guidelines for America's judiciary has taken a major step to stop it from happening. Some lawyers may choose to file cases in specific parts of the country, knowing it'll get assigned to a favorable judge. Under the new rules announced this week, federal judicial districts must now assign a case to judges at random if the case deals with a statewide or national issue. To help us understand this, we're lucky enough to turn again to CBS News legal contributor and Loyola Law School professor Jessica Levinson. So, Jessica, give us the real-world case, or explain to us before we get into the real-world instances why judge shopping happens and why it's not a great idea.
Well, it's a great idea depending on your perspective. For lawyers, particularly those who want to do everything they can to advocate for their client's perspective, it would be silly not to be aware of where you could file a case and which judge you're going to have. Judges are humans. I think the way that you presented this is perfect. It's not quite mom says no, it's we think mom is going to say no. So let's go ahead and ask dad first, and then he'll have the first word, and that will be the law of the land. And so it's not a great idea in the sense that what we have more of are these nationwide injunctions where you can kind of pick your judge, and you know that a judge tends to lean a certain ideological way, and then that judge makes a ruling that affects the entire country. The latest and greatest example, of course, being Judge Kaczmarek in Texas, who ruled essentially to stop the availability of mifepristone, one of the two abortion pills, and that ruling for a while applied nationwide.
And so that's why there is this stipulation that these have to be cases that would be national in scope, so that somebody who's making that narrow play that you described so well doesn't turn out to have implications for the entire country.
Well, that's right. And so we're not talking about every state. We're not talking about every case. We're talking about cases where they could be filed in other places. So we're not going to force people to avoid the rules of civil procedure. But when it comes to a case like the mifepristone case, or frankly, when it comes to immigration cases, for instance, cases that challenged some of President Trump's actions during his administration, what we're saying is don't try and game the system too much. You can still go to a certain district, but don't try and target just one judge.
And does this solve the underlying problems in the system?
I think it goes part of the way there. Now, it's still the case that if you think you have a better shot in, for instance, California or Hawaii, you can still, if the case is appropriate to be filed in one of those places, go there. Or by contrast, if maybe you are somebody who is espousing a conservative perspective, you can still go to Texas and Louisiana. But it prevents you from trying to target one specific judge. Right. Instead, what it allows is go to a state where or district where you're more likely to have a favorable judge. That still is different.
Let me switch topics quickly since we have you as the last question. A Fulton County judge dismissed 6 charges from the Trump election interference case in Georgia. Explain how big a deal that is and how we should think about that.
View it as a blip. So essentially what happened is the prosecution came forward with an indictment that the judge said lacks specificity in certain areas, not the crux of the case, not the core that's this racketeering case, but some other charges. And what the judge said is defendants have to be aware of what they're being charged with in order to mount an appropriate defense. And in this case specifically, the indictment didn't allege the provisions of the Georgia Constitution and the U.S. Constitution that were alleged to be violated in parts of the complaint. And so what the judge said is you can either appeal my ruling or you can go back to a grand jury and point to the specific parts of the Constitution. So it doesn't mean these claims are gone forever. It means that there could be a delay in putting these claims back in the case.
Jessica Levinson, so helpful as always. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you.